Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of TEDXcellence, the show that is both intellitorific and edu-fantastic. And I come to you live from my Corona bunker on the moon with Dog Cat Fox, a Pepperjack, and all of you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Thursday. Tantric Thursday. Maybe. I wish. Anyway, yes, it is Thursday, that wonderful day, the Friday Eve, the penultimate day of the work week, as it were. And what do we have today? Well, so I came across this one, and so this is also a bit of a disclaimer. This is not a new presentation. Okay, as far as I recall, this thing's at least 6 years old or something, but it speaks to something at the core of the subject that we've looked at several times in the past, and that is restorative justice. For those of you that have seen some of the past restorative justice streams, you'll recall that one of the sort of central arguments or the central concepts behind restorative justice is that a wrongdoing represents a breaking of a relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Now, this has been mentioned effectively in passing or as one element of a larger presentation in several of the past restorative justice talks. But this one, at least by its title, promises to focus specifically on that concept. And so that's why I grabbed this one, because I do want to hear a more focused argument on the theory that crime is actually a relationship issue rather than a crime. So that's why I picked this one. But before we get into it, who here is willing to join me on this journey of revelation and information? Why, that would be Jordan Herbert, hello. Iversingatorix, hello. St. Michael, hello. Mr. Joestar, hello. Slapper360, hello. Black Belt for Christ, hello. Zach Osborne, hello. That one servant of Satania, hello. Brad Young, hello. Asian Hippie, hello. Absolutely Degenerate, hello. Tux Mint, hello. Mr. E, hello. You're Ridiculous Lunatic, hello. And then the chat jumped because of course it did. Mike R, hello. Dark Alile, hello. Keeverdam, hello. Advocatus Diaboli, hello. Brian Has Opinions, formerly the Broken Baller, hello. Attack Alpaca, hello. The Luke Skywalker 2, hello. Howard Welsh, hello. Megan Ring, hello. Rotten Corpse, hello. Crimson Tiger, hello. Benenator Zero, hello. The Rusted Monkey, hello. The Rusted Monkey. Does Ranting Monkey know that he has a cousin who's apparently waterlogged? Tiaforix, hello. Foxy Veritas, hello. Somnamnul Nation, hello. Lurking Gopher, hello. And Fernanda, hello. Brutus, hello. Roger Reynolds, hello. Lancelot 652, hello. Check Your Logic, hello. And Nobody Important, hello. Chad Morrison, hello. Dina B, hello. Gulf City Peterbilt Confederacy 379, hello. Spittle Buggies, hello. The Fist Off Shih Tzu, hello. Deco, hello. Drew W, hello. Subpar Genitalia, hello. Renovatio, hello. James Von Maxwell, hello. Emperor W.R. Costin, hello. Cannibalistic Wizard, hello. And All You Need, hello. All right, guys, so we're going to get into this. I am honestly curious. I don't know if I'll be convinced, but I'm honestly curious to hear a more extensive examination of this concept. And this comes from Harvard Law School, so you know it is the creme de la creme of criminal justice theory. As always, I've got the bingo card ready. Link is in the description for those of you who don't already have yours ready. Given the age of this one, I wonder if the bingo card will still apply in any meaningful way. I guess we'll find out together. But with all that being said, I'll let it run for a couple of seconds here as a sound test. You guys tell me if you can hear it. And then after that, we will proceed. Okay, did you hear the applause? That's a good enough sound test for me. Let's see. Sounds good, says Mike R. Quinn the Cultist, hello. Sona S, hello. Bruno Monteiro, hello. Everybody says sounds good. All right, so let's get into it.
Thank you. In our criminal justice system,
Yes.
crime is understood as a violation against the state, a violation of the law.
Well, yes, it's a violation of the law, but it's also the violation of the victim, conceivably. Lady Gopher, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Dogcat Fox. Little loving Dogcat Fox. Oh, Dogcat Fox.
And I feel like there's something missing there.
Okay.
There's something not intuitive
Okay.
about considering crimes to just be breaking a rule and that the only victim would be the state.
Nobody thinks that. No reasonable person would think that a crime is just victimizing the state. I mean, obviously it depends on the crime we're talking about. Like, I mean, if you're speeding down the freeway, maybe you haven't actually harmed anyone, but you're breaking the law. So in that sense, okay, sure. The victim, quote unquote, is the state, or the people you're putting at risk are real people. But that aside, nobody thinks in general that crimes committed only affect, quote unquote, the state. So we're not even 30 seconds into this and already you're not helping your case.
Restorative justice looks at crime as a violation of people and of relationships.
So does criminal justice. Because people are the society. The society is the state, the expectations of how we treat one another. Sorry, I'm I'm going to be interrupting this one a lot if I let myself go.
It understands individuals as interconnected in a community.
A community? You mean a society? You mean a state? Restorative justice does that. Criminal justice does not. Okay.
In a community. We may not always feel like we are part of a community, but many victims of crime have that feeling. They look to a community that may not be there.
Ooh, I don't know what that means. What does that mean? I mean, if like, you know, the police don't respond or they don't get the justice they think they deserve, I suppose. But what do you mean that a community that may not be there?
Most restorative processes bring together victims of crime with the offender and community stakeholders for a facilitated conversation.
That is my understanding, although I've never quite understood the community stakeholder part. I mean, I guess it depends on the situation, the type of crime, and so on. But, you know, yeah, I'm always waiting for like an active example. I've seen a couple of things in documentaries before where like the mother of a murder victim will go to the prison and meet with the killer of her son. I believe that's the one I saw one time, in order to try to understand and something come to some kind of, maybe not forgiveness, but some kind of closure on her part, whatever. But I've never seen like an active example of a restorative justice process that involved the victim, the perpetrator, and quote unquote community stakeholders. So I'm hoping that in the course of this, she will give it a little bit more specificity. What constitutes a community stakeholder? Does she have an example of a real world example where that takes place? Thank you, Drew W. When the community says snitches get stitches, I can see why victims feel they don't get justice. Oh, well. Now let's see where she takes this then.
About what happened and to problem solve.
Okay.
Victims are given the opportunity to speak about what the experience of the incident was like for them. And offenders hear that.
Yes. Okay. And like with all the other restorative justice presentations, I'll be very curious to know if she sets some kind of limit as to where restorative justice programs make sense, or which beyond this line of severity of crime, they don't. Because if she doesn't, I am going to ask rhetorically, I understand, unless she addresses it herself, which would be amazing. What does the conversation between the rapist and the rape victim look like? What does the conversation between the murderer and the family of the victim look like? how is that helpful, and or how is that a replacement for our current criminal justice system?
Offenders also have the opportunity to explain what was going on in their life and what led to their decisions and their actions. Victims can ask offenders questions about why they did what they did.
Okay.
And how can they make things right?
How can they make things right? Okay. Again, it depends on the crime. I mean, some kind of restitution for property damage, that kind of thing. But I know. I'm just waiting. Please give me an active example. Please give me the most extreme crime you can think of where this makes sense. Even if it's hypothetical, just tell me how that works. Because so far, I haven't been sold.
And the community together comes to a solution, how to move forward.
What if the community? Wait, why do I have to defer to the community? If I'm a victim of a crime that, let's say, conceivably could be hashed out amongst two people reasonably, what do they have to do with it? If my sense of resolution conflicts with the quote unquote community sense of resolution, do I get voted down in this process? I mean, is it a vote? Is it a democratic process of some kind? People not directly involved in it, but quote unquote stakeholders, which I still don't know what that means. Do they get a say in the kind of justice that I want? Now, of course, you could say, well, Scribe, that's what happens in court. You have 12 jurors who aren't directly involved in the crime, and they have a say in what the kind of justice you want. Well, sure, but then if that's the case, how is restorative justice any different from our current criminal justice system? All right? Okay.
And how to meet the needs of the victim. It's an inclusive process.
I might argue it might be too inclusive, depending on the circumstances. If you have uninvolved third parties who represent, quote unquote, the community coming in to what is effectively a one-on-one private matter between offender and victim. Anyway.
By giving victims a voice and a seat at the table, it can be very empowering.
Examples,
please. It also
please.
holds offenders accountable to the victim that they've harmed and to the community.
So does the criminal justice system. Unless you're trying to separate, quote unquote, the community from the state. I mean, do you mean like the neighborhood, or what is the community? The city? When does the community stop being the community and turn into the state? What are you talking about?
And by including community stakeholders in a conversation where you hear from the victim and from the offender, it can provide an opportunity to discuss underlying causes of crime in our communities, the real reason why some of these crimes are continuing to happen.
Isn't that regarding like the legislature to examine the laws, their effectiveness, and I'm confused. Thank you, Drew W., for calling themselves progressive. They sure do love taking very ancient type society programs like this. Well, now, I've said this before, there are any number of instances where I could see something like a restorative justice model being an option. Not necessarily a mandatory situation, but an option, you know. And we've talked several times now about this practice in schools, specifically with children. And when you're talking about children, you know, who haven't fully formed how they socialize, are still learning the ropes of how the world works and how to interact with one another, restorative justice type systems over like fights or disagreements or whatever, those can make some sense. You know, shake hands, part as friends, that kind of thing. Sure. You know, when the stakes are low, as in childhood, you know, emergencies, let's say in that sense, that's fine. And I could see some restorative type justice things happening for low level crimes, some kind of restitution made, etc. I could see restorative justice programs being used in concert with the existing criminal justice system in some fashion. Sure. But as a replacement, now I don't know that she said this should be a replacement yet, but it sounds like it. But if she's just talking about it as a peripheral, as an option for a victim, then sure, I guess, maybe. But like I said, I'm still lacking some specificity here.
Before coming to law school, I worked with victims of domestic violence. And in case after case, I watched as our criminal justice system completely failed to meet their needs.
Okay, so we have at least an idea of where your perspective's coming from. Let me look at the card real quick, make sure I haven't lost anything. Attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase. No, restorative justice is not a new thing. Word salad. Everything she said made sense so far. Systemic institutional. Well, she is talking about the criminal justice system. So I will circle it. If for some reason it's not used egregiously and as we go forward, I might take it back. But free space and systemic institutional patriarchy, no. Plays victim, no. Wage gap, no. Childhood to family anecdote, not yet. Anecdote that probably never happened, not yet. Weightless example, not yet. She hasn't given any examples. Privilege, no. White supremacy, no. A list, not yet. Toxic, no. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason, not yet. Unconscious bias, microaggressions, no. Leaves out vital context. Leaves out vital context probably by the end of this if she doesn't start throwing in some details. Self-vilification, wretchedness, not yet, if at all. Benevolent condescension, no. Equity, no. Marginalization, no. Feminism, no. Takes credit for something done by others, no. Mind reading, assumes motives, not yet. And melodramatic, pausing for effect. That one's going to be a little tough to tell necessarily because she's looking down at her cards. But when I think of melodramatic, I think of someone like has to collect their thoughts kind of thing. You know, something like that. I haven't seen that yet either. All right.
I'm going to tell you a story about one of the women that I worked with.
Okay.
Sarah was a college student, and she was sexually assaulted by her ex-boyfriend.
Okay. She
came to me to create a safety plan.
Was that after she went to the police?
And to discuss her options.
Okay.
Sarah was afraid of pressing charges because she thought that he or his friends might retaliate against her.
Okay.
But she also wasn't okay with just not doing anything about it.
Right.
She was angry and she felt violated and she wanted him to know that what he did was wrong.
Yeah, that's why you go to the cops. Okay.
She wanted him to understand why it was wrong.
I have a feeling that if he did what he did, he didn't care that it was wrong. That's why you go to the cops. Okay. Thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people and Scribbles. How is everyone doing today? I'm doing all right. I'm not sure if I'll be all right by the end of this, but you know, it is TEDx.
She had been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after the incident and was having panic attacks, trouble focusing. And she decided that she should take some time off school. So she was moving home.
Please tell me that you advised her to go to the police because evidence, memories, time frames, if you really want that guy to be held accountable for what he did. Oh boy.
Before she moved home, she did go forward with charges.
Okay, good.
Her ex-boyfriend was charged with sexual assault.
Okay.
He pleaded no contest.
Oh, okay.
He didn't have to admit guilt.
Yeah.
But he did accept punishment.
Okay.
His sentence was 3 years of probation. And Sarah watched the proceedings from the back of the courtroom.
Okay.
And she met with me afterwards. And she was so upset. She was upset that the judge didn't say anything about the sexual assault. She said the process moved so quickly. It was just the lawyers talking and then the judge issued his findings. And she said he never explained why it was wrong.
He didn't have to. He pled no contest. I mean, the person doesn't always have to give an allocution. You know, he wasn't challenging the accusation or the charges. So I mean, you can read into that what you want, but I'm sorry. I don't know if your client knows how the criminal justice system works. It is very cold. It can be very cold, and depending on the circumstances, it can be very dissatisfying depending on the circumstances. But oh boy. Thank you, Drew W. She thought backlash from his friends because people push the idea that guys are all about quote unquote rape culture. I mean, I can't say to her specific circumstances. Maybe there was some fear there, and I can't dismiss her fear of taking action against someone legally and there being repercussions that are as well illegal or threatening or some otherwise. It's not unheard of, obviously. So her fears aren't completely unjustified or unfounded. But all the same, if you don't actually go to the cops, nothing will happen. And if the guy did what he did and didn't like suddenly realize in the midst of it that he was doing something wrong and apologize, if he didn't like try to do something about it after the fact, more likely than not, he either knows that what he did was wrong and is never going to admit it, or knows what he did was wrong but doesn't care. All right, so he went through the legal process, 3 years probation. I guess I don't know what kind of sexual assault it was, what the severity was, but maybe that's the best they could do by the law. All right, and then?
And I wasn't surprised. The judges rarely talk to the offender about what they've done. That's not really part of it.
Yeah.
Sarah didn't have the option of a restorative justice proceeding.
Yeah.
But now when I do restorative justice, I think about her a lot and a lot of the other victims that I worked with.
And okay, and I mean, this is given the charges, not exactly the highest level of offense, but okay, this is in spirit kind of what I was asking about. What would be the case sitting down with your sexual assaulter? If he doesn't want to participate, what happens then? I mean, can you compel him to participate? Or I don't know.
I remember Sarah saying to me that what she really wanted was for him to understand that her whole life had been turned upside down. And
tail features in the chat. Feskerma! Fucking me! Goldthroppel! Yeah, that's all I got. I'm a terrible student.
She felt that he never got that and that nothing would stop him from just doing this again. Because no matter what the sentence was, she felt that until someone looked him in the eye and said, this is what you did to my life, he wouldn't see that it was wrong.
I mean, it's a nice notion if you think that looking at a potentially serial sexual offender, just talking to them is going to make them see the error of their ways. It'd be nice if that were the case. I think she's being, I know this is just my cynicism talking, but I think she's being a little naive and overly idealistic. I don't know what to tell you. And again, if you did have a restorative justice program in place at some point, could you compel the offender to participate? Because if the guy does not want to talk to her, if he does not want to confront her or be confronted by her, what do you do then? It's the same question I have about on the flip side of so many other restorative justice things, where they talk on the side of the criminal, because first and foremost, prisons are bad. They don't help out criminals. We need restorative justice. So, and then I ask, well, what if the victims don't want to participate? What if the victim does not want to confront her rapist? What if the family of the murder victim does not want to talk to the murderer? What if they don't want to give them any kind of release or sense of forgiveness or satisfaction? What if they don't want to? On either side of the equation, are you going to compel people to participate? How else does it work?
There are a lot of different models of restorative justice. In Sarah's case, I think
Yeah.
I think when we look at crimes of sexual violence and
Yes.
violent crimes in general.
Yeah.
There's a reason why we punish those crimes sometimes with imprisonment. Restorative justice doesn't suggest that we completely dismantle the criminal justice system.
Oh, well, now, person from 6 years ago, I have to tell you that opinion has evolved quite extensively since you gave this talk. There are some who argue that restorative justice should be the model in replacement, that community stakeholders themselves should be the ones to adjudicate justice locally as fast response justice teams. So, yeah. But here's the thing. I don't disagree with her on that point. Restorative justice should not be something that replaces criminal justice. As an option in specific instances, perhaps as an optional companion piece on the side of people who have been convicted or victims, perhaps, but not a replacement. A supplement, an add-on at most, maybe.
It suggests that there's something missing. So some restorative justice processes would be able to occur even after the sentencing. So Sarah would have been able to, if this was offered, meet with her ex-boyfriend, with a facilitator, and discuss the harms done to her and to come up with solutions for those harms separate from the criminal justice system.
Well, I would hope that such a thing would take place after sentencing, because conceivably, after sentencing is after the person has been found guilty in a court of law, that it's not just simply an allegation at that point. There has been due process. If you're going to have restorative justice before due process, well, then you're assuming guilt without due process and classifying someone as a perpetrator and someone else as a victim without necessarily having all the information. Okay.
There are other models that would be diversionary programs. So there are plenty of cases where a victim doesn't come forward at all because they don't want to be involved with the criminal justice system. They don't want charges to be pressed, but they do want an outcome or an agreement.
So what does that model look like then if no charges or accusation is formally made?
So there are a lot of options. So when you picture...
No. What does that look like? I hope you're not just glossing over that. I hadn't heard that one before, that there's a restorative justice model that accounts for someone who doesn't come forward to make a formal accusation of some kind. What does that model look like?
Picture restorative justice. They don't want you to get an idea that it's only one way. It's principles that we can incorporate in many different parts of the process.
Well, no. You don't. I'm sorry. You can't bring up a scenario like that and not expound on it. Okay. There's a restorative justice model that accounts for someone not coming forward with a formal complaint or formal charge. I was on the same page with you for a second there. You said there was a diversionary model. And I was like, okay, yeah, like someone's brought before the judge because they were caught with drug paraphernalia and possession or something. And the person says, well, either I can lock you up or you can go into a 60-day program to detox and get out of it. If you complete that to the satisfaction of the people who run the clinic, then you'll avoid jail time. Stuff like that. And that kind of process or things similar to that are in place in many places around the country. And I personally don't have any problem with those kind of things at all. Especially for crimes that are effectively crimes, they call them victimless crimes, but, someone who's got a problem, they've got an addiction or some petty minor situation. Sure. But you don't get to bring up you have somebody who doesn't want to come forward and there's a restorative justice model for that. Now onto my next cue card. Like, no. Because I was really interested there for a second. What would that look like? Okay.
It seems to me, from working with victims,
it seems okay
that just having more options could make a huge difference. So many victims that came in to do safety planning, like Sarah, didn't want to press charges at all. And if they had a restorative process as an option, we may be able to engage with them and offer services like the kind that are offered but rarely utilized.
Wait, whoa. Okay, I'm sorry. I gotta keep backing up here. All right. Okay, so Sarah comes to your organization. Okay, she says, my ex-boyfriend sexually assaulted me. All right, I don't want to go to the police. Okay, so I want to engage in a restorative justice, a restorative justice process instead. How does that work? What happens? Who arranges this meeting at that point? I mean, does our speaker, as Sarah's advocate, go to the ex-boyfriend and say, hey, you know, when you sexually assaulted your girlfriend, she'd like to talk to you about that. And also, here are the community stakeholders I'm bringing in to, you know, help facilitate this interaction. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. I never touched her. Goodbye. And he closes the door. Hey, what do you do? What happens then? I mean, you've taken someone's allegation and you've then, you know, communicated that to the accused and they don't want to participate. The end. Unless you're somehow empowered by the state elsewise, or did I miss that part? I'm very confused. Crisis
counseling, safety planning, a feeling of support from the community.
I'm circling leaves out vital context. I'm sorry. It just she's mentioning these things as scenarios, but then she doesn't offer the actual, even a hypothetical example of how that would work. How does restorative justice operate in the absence of a formal allegation to the authorities? Okay, if you're saying that restorative justice should not replace our criminal justice system, why are you bringing it up in context to hypotheticals where the criminal justice system is not involved or is not brought in to be involved? You can't have it both ways there. But could you at least give us the chain of events in your theory as to how a non-criminal justice, restorative justice alternative would operate in Sarah's case? I mean, it's your example. So if the perfect world had existed when Sarah came to you, and the perfect restorative justice practice was in place when Sarah came to you, what would have happened instead that would have brought Sarah more peace and more satisfaction than the criminal justice system? If you do not give us that, then this entire thing is absolutely pointless.
So I don't suggest the criminal justice system forgot about victims. I think what's happening is there's an assumption being made that the goals of the criminal justice system will in some way satisfy what the community needs and what victims want.
Maybe idealists think that, but I've watched enough reality crime shows and legal things and everything to know that more often than not always, but more often than not, the actual end results of the justice system don't always meet the expectations or desires of the public or the victims. It's a common thing that one's thirst for justice and or vengeance often is left unsated by the criminal justice system. But of course, that's part of the point. Part of the point of the criminal justice system, part of the point of all the due process is to have an insulation between acting on emotion versus acting on evidence and fact. That's what separates us from being a vigilante society. That makes us, at least in a sense, more civilized than a society that does not have due process. But restorative justice seems to only want to deal with emotion. I have other things I could say, but it would take me forever, so let's continue.
The goals of deterrence and retribution, I think, are assumed to meet victim and community needs. So I would just suggest that we think about that a little bit more.
Okay, community needs are established by the laws that we all abide by. If the laws are inadequate, you go to the legislature and you change them. You make them stronger or you loosen them up depending on the circumstances. That's what the community needs. Is it what every individual thinks is correct? No. Is everyone satisfied with how the law works in certain circumstances? No. Is the law an immutable object that will never be allowed to change? No. Okay.
Because maybe they partially do, but there's clearly something missing.
Yes.
If we wish to build a safer society,
yes,
and meet the needs of the community,
yes,
we might want to engage more in discussions with actual community members. And
what is the size of the community? What constitutes a community? Again, is it the neighborhood? Is it the district? Is it the town, the city? Is it the region? I mean, what constitutes the community? Is it the immediate people in geographic circumference to where the crime took place or to the family members involved? What is the community? You need to define that because I don't know what you mean by that. You might as well say society. You might as well then say the state.
Community members and victims of crime. Thinking about retribution, I think of people saying that a criminal is in prison paying his debts or her debts to society. And I wonder, what are those debts and who's getting that payment?
Okay.
Edna and Sheldon were an 80-year-old, or in their 80s, couple.
Okay.
They came home on a Sunday afternoon to find their door busted open and their belongings scattered throughout their house.
Okay.
And it took them a long time to put everything back in place. They called the police.
They put everything back in place and then called the police? That's unfortunate.
They were scared. The police found 2 teenage boys that had been responsible for breaking into their home and stealing some jewelry and a laptop.
Okay.
And Edna and Sheldon did not want to press charges through the criminal justice system.
Okay.
They had a lot of doubts about what youth offenders experience and how the criminal justice system might make their life take a turn for the worse.
Okay.
Luckily, the restorative justice program that I'm involved with took their case.
So a restorative justice program applied to teenagers, I'm going to assume legal minors here, over what amounts to, I mean, it is breaking and entering, but it's still effectively sort of low-level crime. Okay. I'm not unsold on it yet.
And in the circle, Edna was able to ask the teenage boys, why did you choose our house? Like, why us? And where in the house did you go? That was very important to her. She wanted to know if they had gone through her drawers, if they had looked through her things. She just felt violated and she wanted answers.
Okay, there was a step missed there. What compelled these teenagers to attend this thing? Did they do it willingly, which is fine? But I mean, what caused them to want to participate in this restorative justice program? You left out a major step there. They called the cops, didn't want to press charges, and then, okay.
And the teenagers were able to express guilt, feelings of shame.
Uh-huh.
They were able to apologize.
Uh-huh.
And Edna and Sheldon were still angry.
Yeah.
The agreement that they came to involved paying back and returning stolen items.
Okay.
But also the boys would do community service.
They just agreed upon that of their own accord? She hasn't given any details on how this is enforced or how this is facilitated. Okay.
I don't think that Edna and Sheldon felt an overwhelming feeling of forgiveness or anything like that. So I would push back on some people say that's an element. to restorative justice.
Well, if it isn't inherently so, why do you keep talking about satisfaction for the victims? I mean, obviously, this was their decision not to press charges, and they agreed to go along with this and take the restitution as they did. It didn't solve the problem per se. It did not make them feel whole per se. All right, well, so restorative justice is not a cure-all for the lack of satisfaction that comes from the criminal justice system. And if the main point of restorative justice, at least so far as your presentation has said, is to improve the outcomes for the victims, what then is your argument? Tall person, thanks so much. Hoy, I just got home from work and we'll watch in full later. Happy National Lemonade Day, everybody. Oh boy, lemonade. I got some strawberry lemonade fizzy drink around here somewhere. I should have that later. Okay.
It's something more, it's just deeper than that. I think it's just a recognition of humanity. They were able to hear why the teenagers had made those choices and what their lives were like.
What? Okay, they found out what the teenagers were. Did the teenagers fulfill their restitution? Did they do the community service? Did they ever, return to any criminal activities or anything? I mean, did the restorative justice process cease the criminal behavior? I mean, as much as I hope this kind of process has some benefit to the victims, ultimately the other part of the equation is that by confronting the perpetrators, it's somehow going to alter their perspective on their own behavior and actions for the future and reduce recidivism, right?
I think that everyone in the circle learned a little bit more about how difficult it can be for youth and why they might turn to doing something like this.
And that does what? That does what? I mean, the harm was done. The door was broken. The house was screwed up. The stuff was stolen. I'm curious to know how the teenagers were found. I assume the police found them. Understanding their motives, great. Okay. And that does what? What does that do for the victims? I mean, aside from finding out, hey, why did you pick my house so I can take steps to maybe do something to disincentivize it from happening again? Like, consulting the professional burglar or something for how to make your security better. What?
In that way, restorative justice inspires me
What?
that
What?
in any realm that we find ourselves in, whether it's the criminal justice system or another area of law or any conflict we're having with another person.
Like murder?
I think it's really important to remember that even though we don't always feel like we're part of a community, that we are interconnected.
If I don't feel like I'm part of a community and I become the victim of crime, and a restorative justice program says that community stakeholders need to be involved as facilitators in this process, are they forced upon me, even though I don't know them or feel any connection to them, and the crime was done to me and not to these strangers in the room with me? I was really hoping you'd explain some of these things. I really was.
And I've seen the transformative effects of that dialogue on an offender. One of our facilitators was a career bank robber.
One of your facilitators? Okay.
In and out of prison. And he said he never felt remorse for his acts. He never thought that there were victims.
He never felt remorse for his acts because he never thought there were victims. So he goes into a bank, holds a gun or threatens someone that they fill up his bag full of money, and then he leaves, and he never thought that there were victims. Save for the teller that he terrorized right there, or threatened with a gun, or threatened with some kind of violence, or whatever. Oh, okay. Now, what What a great guy. Yeah, boy, I'd want to have that guy as a facilitator. Wait, was he the facilitator or was he the subject? Because it doesn't sound like he has any connection to humanity at all right there.
He's robbing banks. And now he looks back, and when he works with young offenders, he's reminded that, of course, there are victims of crimes. Of course, there were people there when he robbed the bank who were traumatized by the experience.
Yeah, he didn't understand that prior, huh? He just walked into a bank, some soulless brick and mortar box, and then just walked out with the money and nothing occurred in between. Only then did he understand that there were people involved in the process of the crimes he committed. Wow.
He said if he had to look across the table from someone who had been hurt by what he had done, it would change the way he thought about his actions.
That's a pretty poor statement about that person, honestly. But then I guess somebody who's a serial bank robber really didn't give a rip in the first place. The other thing, too, and I hate to put a damper on our speaker's parade here, but when it comes to, let's say, career criminals, like a career bank robber, or just criminals in general, people who've already done something underhanded to someone else, how do you know they're not just telling you what you want to hear? How do you know they're not lying? How do you determine that? Just curious.
I think it's really important for us to remember that we are motivated by the relationships that we have with other people. And recognizing that and trying to understand what's underlying conflict and crime can build a safer community.
Hey, okay, you know what? If I'm sitting alone at home, or let's take the old couple, for example. Okay, conflict. You had an old couple. They lived by themselves, didn't bother anybody. They didn't even know these teenagers. These teenagers came out of nowhere, victimized them at random, or selected them for whatever reason. There's no conflict there between the boys and the old people. They didn't know each other. The only conflict was they visited crime upon these innocent people. Knowing why the boys did it isn't a relationship between the old man and woman and the teenagers. There was no relationship there. They're strangers. What are you talking about?
And can empower people who've been harmed. Thank you so much.
How were the old couple empowered? I mean, aside from whatever insight they received from the teenagers as to why they were targeted, which, like I say, may result in some kind of improvements to their home security, you just said yourself they didn't feel satisfied. They were still angry. They still felt violated, and so on and so forth. How were they empowered at that point? What exactly was the result where both sides left that conversation better off than they were beforehand? You didn't tell us that. If it had happened, I would assume you would tell us that as a success story. But nothing you listed off here, even as active examples, were success stories. And you didn't even give the example of what Sarah would have done in a restorative justice process outside of going to the police, or how that would even work. Honestly, guys, I thought that a talk titled the way it's been titled would be very focused and give some very specific examples and information. Even if it ended up being gobbledygook, at least something. But, and this is Harvard Law School, and this was like something like 6 years ago. So this isn't taking place in the zeitgeist of the current crises and such. Okay, well, thank you, Lancelot 652. This is some hippie feel-good stuff. Like I said, there are elements to the restorative justice theory that I could see working, and I've seen work to some extent in the real world. Diversionary processes, having an option aside from jail, depending on the crime, depending on the circumstances. Low-level crimes, again, depending on the particulars of the crime. Maybe there's something alternative to that. Now, the example she brought up with the old people and the teenagers. Okay, the teenagers make restitution. They paid for the damage. They gave back the items, and they did community service on that rather than going to jail, rather than being prosecuted and having charges pressed. Okay. I mean, if that's what the victims want to do, and they want to give these kids a second chance, I can't necessarily fault them. It wasn't a violent crime, so sure. And if these restorative justice advocates would come out and say, restorative justice practices make sense for third-degree misdemeanors and down, or something like that. If they set a line and they said, this is where you would consider possible restorative justice alternatives, I'd say, hey, now at least we're talking shop at that point, right? It's not just restorative justice is this great thing. And then I have to ask, what about the rapist? What about the murderer? What about the con man that destroys someone's finances? If you're not going to set a line for where this makes sense, then everything's fair game. And I think only one speaker on the restorative justice stuff that I've ever looked at actually said something to the effect of restorative justice does not make sense for all crimes. I was like, okay, you just took away half of my apprehension, but anyway, thank you, Drew W. God of the gaps. Is this God of the generation? If she's in law school and she's aiming to become a lawyer, that was a poor argument. Very poor argument. This is Kyle. I looked up the definition of the word naive thinking. I'd find a picture of the speaker. Instead, I got a link to her TED Talk. Ha ha. Okay, well, truth be told, this was a relatively light on the bingo card today, but let's go over it one more time. All right, attempt to coin new buzzword, buzz phrase. No. And I can't retroactively say, oh, well, this happened 6 years ago, so something she said was new then. I can't estimate that. And restorative justice is not a new concept to that. There was a restorative justice. The Truth and Reconciliation process in South Africa after apartheid was a restorative justice process. So it wasn't a new concept even then. Word salad. She said some things there that made absolutely like and it didn't make any sense. Like she just said stuff and then moved on. So yeah, word salad, I'm circling that one. Systemic institutional. She talked about the criminal justice system. Maybe that's too low bar to circle that, but given the circumstances of the talk and the bingo card, I'm not that worried about it. Patriarchy, no. Plays victim, no. She never talked about her playing victim. Wage gap, no. Economics never really came up. Childhood or family anecdote, she never talked about herself. Anecdote that probably never happened. Everything that she said sounded reasonable. And the fact that every anecdote that she gave between Sarah and the old couple, the details that she relayed didn't actually help to support her argument, or like make restorative justice sound better. Yeah, so I believe that those things happen. Now, weightless example. The old couple example. I mean, the very fact that she said the couple came away from that process still angry, still unsatisfied, and she didn't go on to say, the boys went on to become, saints or something. That example did not support the argument that restorative justice is somehow a better option versus the criminal justice system. So, yeah, weightless example. Privilege, she never brought that up. White supremacy, no. A list, not that I can recall. Toxic, no. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason, no. Microaggressions and conscious bias, no. I'm actually kind of surprised she didn't bring up bias in there somewhere. Self-vilification, wretchedness, no. She never really talked about herself. Benevolent condescension, not really. She didn't bring up any demographics per se, so it's kind of hard to go for that one. Equity, no. Marginalization, marginalized, no. Feminism, no. Takes credit for something others did, no. Mind reading assumes motives. No, not that I can think of. And melodramatic pausing for effect. She paused in places that had nothing to do with her cue cards, but it was more her searching for the words she was going to say. It was more pausing because of lack of preparedness or something. I don't know. it didn't seem melodramatic. Let's put it that way. Okay, so let me show you where I have the card right now, and you guys can tell me what you think, if something else should be changed. There's what the card looks like right now. Over to the chat. You guys have anything to say? I'll do this, and then we'll wrap things up in a couple minutes here. Relatively quick one today. Assassin of the Gray, South African restorative justice today involves machetes and torture. Well, I actually looked to the actual Truth and Reconciliation process and how even that on a nationwide scale left people dissatisfied more times than not. Kind of let people off the hook who shouldn't have been in replacement of criminal justice. And so that's always sort of like in the back of my head starting point when I hear a restorative justice argument. It's like, well, this experiment was attempted nationwide in South Africa after apartheid, and it left more people dissatisfied than satisfied with the outcome. So you're going to have to overcome a massive test of this theory before I'm going to believe anything about it. But I'm always willing to give it a chance, obviously so. Absolutely Degenerate. X to doubt on the he never knew he was victimizing people story. That didn't happen, no way. I don't know. I mean, again, is this guy telling her what she wanted to hear? Was he trying to hit on her in this process? Boy, you sure helped me. This is great. How about drinks late? I mean, I don't know. I don't know if that constitutes an anecdote that probably never happened. But okay, chat, let me know what you think about that one. I'm not so sure that sounds necessarily unreasonable, but okay. Because I could see someone saying that even if they're lying. I don't necessarily think that the anecdote itself, unless you're trying to say that his saying that is the anecdote that's never happened. Because I can believe her telling us that he said that happened. I don't know if I want to start extending anecdotes off to third parties. Let's see. That one. Oh, you're talking to somebody else. Let's see. Assassin of the Grave. Violating someone's sense of home can be more damaging than physical violence. Sure, because then you don't feel safe in your own home. You feel paranoid at the security of your own living space. Sure. Renovescio, her example of the boys paying off their crime is saying if you are rich, you should be able to avoid criminal liability for criminal acts. Exact opposite of equal treatment before the law. I suppose. I mean, I guess it depends on where they got the money from and so on. But sure, yeah, you pay off your debts. But of course, we have laws that require restitution be made by the perpetrator over time too. $10,000 fine, so on and so forth. And depending on the jurisdiction, there are restitution things that go directly towards the victim. They have to make usually it's in a civil suit afterwards, but all the same. So sure. In that sense, if that was, but here's the thing: what's the downside? If you're not involving the criminal justice system, if there is no Damocles sword of do this or you will go to jail, and that's why I was so curious to know about that step between the old people not going to the cops or not pressing charges, and then them being in a restorative justice process. Why are the teens there? Is this an official diversionary program? Do they have the incentive hanging over their head of, if you do this and fulfill these requirements, you won't go to jail? She never told us that, so I don't know how the mechanics of it work. But sure, if it's a matter of you have to pay off this thing in order to avoid jail, then yeah, you'd have a lot of situations where people with money would be able to avoid jail and people who didn't have money wouldn't. But she didn't explain that, so I don't know. BG, Scribe-like, problem is a lot of law schools are teaching lawyers/clerks to argue from a conclusion and twist law's precedents to fit their needs instead of looking for precedents that fit their argument. I mean, I've had friends who have been in the legal profession of one kind or another, and I've talked to them about this, and I don't know if this is true across the board, just what I've heard, is that it really depends on the circumstances. Sometimes it is a matter of reverse engineering. In order when you're trying to defend your client, if you're a criminal defense attorney, there's not a lot of stops on what you can try to do to try to give them a defense. Even if, on its face, there are some ridiculous arguments made, but that's your job, to make that attempt to a vigorous defense and so on. So I guess it depends on which side of the aisle you're on in the criminal justice system and the circumstances, because creative prosecution, creative defenses have sometimes succeeded, either when they should or when they shouldn't. So, but no, I understand the point, though. Let's see, some emulation. By the looks of the card, talks 6 years ago seem like they might be slightly more tactful than those of today, less crazy, or just this speaker, Scribelight. I think it's a matter of the fact that it was a very focused talk of a kind. I mean, she never really strayed away from the subject matter. She never threw in a whole bunch of extraneous stuff, like, a childhood or family anecdote or a list of steps or something. Even though in this instance, I actually would have appreciated some specificity as to how this process works. But she talked in ambiguities most of the time and didn't stray from the main subject. So as a result, there wasn't a whole lot of other elements or concepts thrown in there. Now, it could also be, as you say, an artifact of how old this is, in that a lot of the buzzwords, buzz phrases, sort of easy fallback notions to just fill up space that we see so often today probably weren't nearly as prevalent 6 years ago as they are now. So, yeah, she might have benefited from the era in which this took place. TC Boggs, the Chewbacca defense. The Chewbacca defense? Let's see. Thrashy says, this must be the least amount of bingo circles I've seen. I think you might be right. At this point, it might be so. This is a relatively light one. I don't find that my time was ill spent, though. And here's why. I really do want to understand the argument, if only to be able to effectively argue against it if somebody tries to pitch it to me in the future. Because like I say, I do see merits to restorative justice in certain circumstances. It's when someone takes the binders off, going back to Chewbacca for a second, and just doesn't give any kind of limitation to it, doesn't give any kind of scope to it, just says, well, or just, it's an endless scope. Everything can possibly apply here. No. So, because I do find it interesting, because it is something that people are talking about more and more, especially right now with the abolishing police, starting community social service alternatives, and so on. That doesn't necessarily inherently involve restorative justice, as in, victim speaks to perpetrator, etc. But it's in the same, it's in the same family of notions. And I only think the more that we hear from people who believe in these concepts, their best arguments and presentations for those concepts, do we have a better idea of what we're dealing with and what the possibilities might be. Like I say, I'm always waiting for someone to come across with a restorative justice argument that says, I believe restorative justice is a beneficial alternative to misdemeanor crimes in the 3rd degree and lower under these circumstances. And here's how I've seen in trial programs how this has helped people both on the perpetrator side and the victim side. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, that would be the most interesting presentation to me. If somebody said this is a supplementary option, a diversionary option to our existing criminal justice system that has a limit as to where it would be implemented, and here are some active examples of how it has helped people. I'd be very interested in that presentation. I have yet to come across it. Some emulation Scribelight agreed that talks today seem to try add as many buzzwords as they can, like they are actively trying to help us achieve a bingo. Yeah, I think that's the benefit of the bingo card in the modern day. I don't know if it would apply as much going backwards, because TEDx's have evolved over time. Not necessarily in quality, but in content to what we see today. And let's see, I'll get one or two more comments here. Tux Mint, a so-called stakeholder. well, I'm like, and the idea of community stakeholders or how it affects the community, that's been brought up in the modern talks as well. And to this day, I don't understand, what does the community have to do with it? Define the community. Someone that was not actually involved or a victim of the crime has what to say about my process of restoration, as the victim. What is that? What does it matter what they think? Unless this happened like in a neighborhood, or like someone ran through an apartment building and terrorized the children while robbing somebody specific. I don't even know what that's supposed to mean. And Advocatus Diaboli, I don't hold stakes. I don't trust people with sledgehammers. And on that vampiric note, I'm going to call it there. Guys, thank you so much for coming out today. I had hoped this would be educational, and in a way it was, but in several other ways it wasn't. I will keep searching for that interesting argument regarding restorative justice, because it is something I'm interested in. It'll be a while before I do another restorative justice subject matter. It'd have to be something that really catches my eye or is very on point with current events. I don't think I'm going to go digging in the past as much as I did this time. This was kind of an experiment to see if some some wisdom absent current events would have some more clarity. But I was wrong. Now, if you'd like to hear more from me, or Satsu 2 Cents, or the Ranting Monkey, you can find all three of us tonight on Satsu 2 Cents' channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, 9 p.m. Eastern for The Lords of the Night, where we will talk about the news of the day, news stories that you submit, what we've been up to on the intertubes, and then your questions and comments. Everyone, I hope you have a good rest of your Thursday. I hope your Friday is going to treat you well ahead of the weekend. I hope you are all also safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And if you're not safe, please find a safe place, I guess. Bye, everybody.